board meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Park Commissioners. It is Thursday, January 19th, 2023 at 7 p.m. We're in the boardroom at Wohlers Hall, 733 North Prospect Avenue, Park Ridge, Illinois. Please stand for the pledge. Mary Ann, if you could please call the roll.
Commissioner Bendy? Here. Commissioner Bowe? Here. Commissioner Coyne?
Present.
Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Halting?
Here.
Commissioner Tuttle?
Here.
Commissioner Leduc?
Here. Does anyone have anything to amend, add, or delete to the current agenda? Seeing none, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? All right. Now we'll move on to the public hearing then. The Park Board will now hold a public hearing for the issuance of general obligation limited tax park bonds in an amount not to exceed $6,200,000 for the payment of land condemned or purchased for parks, for the building, maintaining, improving, and protecting of the same, and the existing land and facilities of the district, and for the payment of the expenses incident thereto. All persons desiring to be heard will now have an opportunity to present written or oral testimony with respect to the 2022 proposed tax levy. First, are there any written or oral comments from the commissioners? Seeing none, are there any written or oral comments from the public? Also seeing none, are there any additional comments from the public? All right. All persons desiring to be heard have been given an opportunity to present oral and written testimony with respect to the proposed issuance of the bonds. May I have a motion to finally adjourn the public hearing? I move to adjourn the public hearing of the Board of Park Commissioners. Sorry. No, you, please do.
Second.
I'm the one who jumped the gun there. Mary Ann, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bendy?
Yes.
Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Yes.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Halting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes. I declare the public hearing finally adjourned. And now I move to approve the regular board meeting minutes of Thursday, December 15th, 2022, and Thursday, January 5th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor? Seeing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Moving on. I have nothing to report. Was there anything from Dirk?
Excuse me. There is one item, but it will come under Terry's report. I'm distracted for a minute. Yeah, about the zoning.
Okay.
Talk about.
In that case, Gail will move on to your report.
All righty, just some updates. It's been a very busy start to the new year. We had a great project kickoff meeting with the architects from White. I believe it was about a 5-hour meeting. Covered all kinds of topics. It was very, very informative and productive. A lot of the staff were there. We were able to get into a lot of the different areas and dig into the details and move some things around and talk about, some very important things we heard during the process, which we will be getting into a little bit later in my report, not that much later. Had the bond rating call on Tuesday. It went very well. We're very optimistic that We're hoping to keep our rating, AA plus. And, huh? Shouldn't be a problem. And Bob's here too. And Bob Lewis is here if there's any questions as well. But yeah, so it was a very productive call. And April and I are working on, we're going to be meeting with the school district, District 64. Terry, April, and I all had input into the overriding agreement. The last one we did was the Beyond the Bell one, and the overriding school district agreement is expired, so that also is being updated. We've been working on that. So we plan to meet with them again next Tuesday. We're also meeting with the Historical Society next week, some of the rec staff and myself, to talk about some programming opportunities to help them get more exposure. And they're looking for some opportunities for financial opportunities and exposure as well. Let's see, we've internally advertised Boo, the superintendent of finance position, and working on some things with that. We have IPRA conference starting next Thursday, so a lot of the staff, and we have 3 commissioners this year attending the conference. So be happy to answer any questions about any of those topics or anything else this time. I'm going to go marketing and public relations or human resources, if anybody has any questions on those. Seeing none. But were we going to have Bob present anything, or yeah, I think, can we move that? Yeah, right, exactly. So yeah, we can do that. Yeah, I think that's better before we get into the Oakton. Okay, great. In the back. It's weird.
Some additional information on the market, to supplement Jason's presentation last time that he covered for me, and also the email information. And hopefully this provides some additional data. I think we did have an interest rate chart in there, but it was just a shorter period of time. And that I think these charts will give you a longer dated period of time. Usually when we provide that many charts, the commissioners are like, this is like an economics book. So I cut it down to one slide, but for that purpose. But this first chart is the histogram. Let me go back to graph. This is the data set that that interest rate chart that you saw last time of the 1-year rate, the 5-year rate, the 10 and the 20. And what this is a dispersion of just the 10-year rate in the MMD over the last 30 plus years in 25 basis point increments. So the current 10-year MMD of 2.21% is, you can see on the left-hand side of the chart, which means roughly 2/3 of the time over the last 32 years, the 10-year rate has been higher than it is today, from a historical perspective again. So then we shorten the time frame to the 20 years, switching back to a graph here. Why we do that one as a histogram and why we do these graphs, I don't know. It's what the analysts provide. But so just as a reminder, the gray area represents the federal funds rate. Now this is 20 years worth of data. And the lines represent the 1, the 5, the 10, and the 20 year MMD. Reminder that the MMD is a market basket of AAA rated bonds from across the country. It's like the Dow Jones Industrials is for the stock market. We use it to monitor trends. It's not necessarily meant to be exactly where you borrow as an issuer, but it allows you to discern the trajectory of interest rates over a longer period of time. And a couple of highlights on this slide that I like to point out when presenting it is the uh, detachment that sometimes medium long-term rates have from monetary policy. So, for example, what I'm talking about is in 2000, from 2009 to 2017, you can see when the Fed had that unprecedented period of time of 0 to 0.25% after the Great Recession, the 1-year rate was highly correlated during that period of time to what the Federal Reserve policy was. Whereas you look at the 5-year rate, the 10-year rate, and the 20-year rate, they're moving up and down throughout that period of time because there's a whole host of other factors that impact medium long-term rates than just Federal Reserve policy. Of course, if you look at more recent history, to the far right of the chart, you can see a high correlation between Federal Reserve policy and all 4 interest rate charts. Now, what that means is you look at those 2 periods of time is that when interest rates do pivot to go downward, whether that's later this year or 24, 25, there's a lot of debate between the Federal Reserve governors of when that might be. Of course, it's going to depend on how inflation unfolds, whether we go into a recession or not. But when that occurs and the Federal Reserve starts to lower rates, it doesn't necessarily mean that all rates will come down. It could be that the shorter term rates come down and the medium to long term rates kind of stay stubborn where they're at, because those things can be influenced by conditions besides Federal Reserve policy. The other thing I'll point out in this chart is the red line there. That's the average 10-year rate over this 20-year period. And the 10-year rate is that dark blue line. The reason why we focus on 10-year rates, so the industry's sort of adopted in the bond markets. The 10-year is the bellwether to look at, whether it's a 10-year treasury, 10-year corporate, 10-year muni rate. You can see that the 10-year rate currently is below the average over that 20-year period of time. So we're sort of there at that midpoint then of 20 years. If you look over 30 years, we're in the lower third of where interest rates have been historically. And this is the chart that you saw last time. And this just takes the same data set you saw in the prior slide and starts at the beginning of 2020. And I'm sorry if I'm repeating some of the things that Jason had said, but the far left side, when rates went up very quickly and then it came down very quickly, that was a historic period of time in the municipal bond market. And indeed, it was a historic period of time everywhere, every financial aspect, because that's when COVID hit. And interest rates shot up significantly in every market other than treasury rates, which actually went down. And then things stabilized very quickly as Federal Reserve stepped in, cut interest rates, created unprecedented programs like for municipalities to actually borrow directly from the Fed. And then, of course, Congress stepped in with various stimulus bills, which returned some stability to our market, just like it brought stability to other markets. And then we entered that period of time of relative stability for a year, year and a half, where we had some ebbs and flows as supply and demand and other factors cause interest rates to move up and down until we came back from the holidays in 2021 to January of 22, and like everybody came back and started worrying about inflation, Federal Reserve policy. I think everybody started to say this whole discussion of inflation being transitory is bunk. It's kind of built in, and it's going to be a bigger problem than the Federal Reserve has told us, and interest rates sort of went up significantly over much of last year. We have experienced a rally since November, a little bit towards the end of December, of rates popping back up. That rally has been fueled by the better than expected CPI reports. We've had the November and December were better than expected. January was right on target. And then, again, supply and demand conditions come into play as well, because the lack of, until this week, there hasn't been a lot of supply of muni bonds. So just go back to your old economics. Supply is lower, interest rates are going to fall to meet the demand for those bonds. So one more chart that I like is everything up to now, as we've been talking about absolute interest rates, where are they at a certain level over different periods of time? One other factor that we pay attention to when we're monitoring trends in the market is relative interest rates. So we take the 10-year MMD, divide it by the 10-year treasury rate. Now, that should, under normal conditions, be less than 100% because uh, remember, your municipal bonds are tax exempt. So your investors don't pay taxes on the interest you pay them. So a high grade municipal bond should have a lower rate than a US Treasury bond. So that's why its ratio under normal conditions should be under 100%. Now, that spike there that you see in the middle of the graph, that was the COVID period of time because nobody wanted anything but US Treasury bonds. There was some discussion, you may recall, that would the 10-year Treasury actually go negative? And it never did, but many other bonds across the world did. Then we entered into a period of time after that where we got to some lows, just above 50%. Much of last year, as interest rates were rising, you saw this approach 100, even go over 100%. What that means is investors weren't valuing the tax exemption. So on a relative basis, municipal bonds were high relative to treasuries. And what we see now today is municipal bonds with that rate coming back down again, this ratio, are very, what we say in the industry, rich to treasuries. And that's primarily due to lack of supply, but it also means we're sensitive to movements in treasury rates, more so than maybe we were at the end of last year, because there's only so low that this ratio can go. So as treasuries start climbing, if they were to rebound, treasuries have been going down here recently, this ratio can't go down anymore. It's just muni rates would have to go up with the treasury rates, So that's the market update. If I can just add a couple of talking points from the email I shared is, everybody I work with, when they pass a referendum or have some other project that doesn't necessarily need the funding right now, you're all faced with the dilemma of deciding when to issue the bonds. And I always look at the situation and say, okay, what variables do we know? And one of the variables is that short-term investment rates are very high right now. In fact, short-term rates are higher than medium long-term rates in the treasury market. So you can make a lot of money on the bonds while you're waiting to use them. That was not true for many years. And so that additional interest that you earn offsets the interest that you're paying. Secondly, we know if you sell the bonds today, in the present, that it's highly likely that you will meet the taxpayer impact that you told to your taxpayers. And oftentimes that's what my clients are most interested in, is being able to go back to the taxpayers and say, hey, it didn't cost X, actually cost X less a little bit, versus going back and saying, nope, sorry, it was X plus some. And the third variable that's very important is, well, if we wait, we won't earn interest on that money. We have the risk of possibly not meeting the taxpayer objective, but we could be better by waiting. We could be worse. You just don't know that. And it's up to, I can't predict what's going to happen over the next year. The running joke that anybody presents in our industry says, if I could predict that, I wouldn't be here talking to you because I would have made gobs of money predicting interest rates. But things to keep in mind is the market's priced in an expectation of, at some point, the Fed's going to cut rates later this year, next year. Right now the market sort of disagrees with the Fed. That's a talking point right now as you read the industry news. Is the market or the Fed governors, when they speak, generally are contradicting what the market's telling us now. The Fed governors make it seem like they're going to keep the Fed funds rate where it's at or even higher for a longer period of time. Some of that may be them playing psychology with us, because so much of inflation is people behaving on what they think is going to have. So they're playing a psychology game with us, like, well, they're going to keep monetary policy tight for a long period of time. And I think the market's kind of saying, yeah, we don't believe you fully. And fuel prices, of course, have a big impact on inflation in and of itself, and then on everything else we buy. And one thing I read a couple days ago, it wasn't in the email, was that the price of oil has been coming back up a little bit. We're now above 80. I don't know what it did today, but the talking point in this article is the Chinese economy has recovered much more quickly than everybody expected from this COVID pandemic there, as they ripped the Band-Aid off, if you will. And there's some concern that could cause oil to rise more, maybe we can get back up above $100 a barrel course, that would put more inflation pressure on things. So, um, so whether you sell them now or you wait to sell them later on, oh, I forgot the other variable is the cost of issuance. If you split the financings, would be roughly $38,000 or $39,000 higher by splitting them. Um, and if, let's say, rates do come, and you know what, rates will probably come down between now and when you can refinance these bonds. I mean, it's just historically rates will ebb and flow. And what's the nice thing is just like your home mortgage is you don't have to, while this is a 25-year bond, you don't have to pay that higher interest rate for all 25 years. The difference, though, with our home mortgage is if rates go down in 3 years, you can refinance your home mortgage right then. Municipal bonds, you have to wait 9 years or so until you get to the call date, in which you can refinance the bonds. But this is a 25-year bond, so you still have 15 more years to pay. So I've said a lot, shared a lot of information. Any questions or anything else I can address?
I really appreciate your email, and I appreciate the economics lessons. There's just a lot of moving parts, and I see what you're saying, that we know now we can do what we want to do now. We don't know that for sure later.
Right.
So I respect that, and you always do us right. So.
Okay.
I was curious, like when we do smaller bound offerings, it's always someone local who picks it up. Like who will buy these? Do you know?
Yeah, so what we will do is, we'll probably do it shortly, is we put your bond issue in the industry publication called The Bond Buyer. It'll also be listed on Bloomberg. And then we put them out to bid where different underwriters will put bids in, like Robert W. Baird and Raymond James, Mesro Financial, Citigroup. And, so I expect you'll get anywhere between 5 to 11 firms maybe to put a bid in. And so they're buying them and underwriting the bonds. And then they will distribute those bonds to their investor clientele, which would be like Nuveen and Fidelity, maybe some individuals. But these days, most of us as individuals, if we're going to buy municipal bonds, we buy an exchange traded fund or a mutual fund that invests in those bonds. So that's how they'll get distributed, because they're larger bond issues with a longer length. Whereas the shorter bond issues, you bypass the public market and you go right to the investor, a bank. So you do have higher costs of issuance with a public offering than you do with a placement, but that cost of issuance is amortized in the case of referendum bond over 25 years. So the benefit you get from getting a much lower interest rate more than offsets the cost of issuance. Yep. Any other questions? Yeah, thank you for again having me here, and
Good to see you again.
yeah, thank you.
So the timing is the next 30 days or something?
Yeah, it'd be sometime. It's the beginning of February, right? February, the second week of February. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so hopefully the positive trends that we're seeing on that ratio, and also just where they are on an absolute level, that stays there. We had those improvements we saw sort of stalled out today. The index went down maybe at 1 or 2 basis points, but not as much as it had gone down the last few days. So things have seemed to plateau a little bit. So the other good news we had this week was the PPI report came in negative 0.5, which is much lower than they anticipated. So. Right. Yeah. So yeah. Well, and, you'll have actually 2 ordinances, one for the non-referendum bonds, one for the referendum bonds. They have to be voted on separately. And in those resolutions, they'll set forth the maximum term and the maximum amount, and then the bonds are sold shortly thereafter, and the board is authorizing the administration and the board president to then sign off on the bond sales. This is how we've done that in the past. And that way we don't have to have the sale on the day that you're meeting, which may not be a good day to sell. So, the Federal Reserve does meet one more time before we sell. I think I think they start to meet on January 31st and conclude on February 1st. I think most are expecting another 25 to 50 basis point increase, but then, like, again, the market's already factored that in. So, okay. Yes. Okay. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Bob. All right. So nothing on human resources and marketing, correct, on my report? I did not hear any questions. We'll go into the discussion on Oakton. As I said, we had a great first meeting and walked through a lot of different details, moving through the different areas of the building. The items listed, and I believe there's one more I have on here, sustainability on my notes. What the goal is tonight is, they're building right now the cost for us, and then they're going to come back and tell us this is what we're looking at in terms of a revised cost, or with any of the changes we've made, and with everything that they're calculating through. So it's time for us to give them direction if it's different from what they're thinking or they're estimating. And also, we'll start. There's a meeting set up. Did that meeting get set up with the city? A preliminary meeting, is that next week? So that, we're moving, it seems quickly, but there's, this time frame that we have to make these big decisions to be able to, go through all of these steps, right? The permitting, the site plan review, all the things. So the things that we've listed here are things I want to walk through tonight. And I'd like to get a consensus, if possible, on all of these items. And if we can't get a consensus, that's okay. We'll keep talking about it and get you more information that you may need. The first and probably biggest one is what? Oh, okay. I thought you wanted me to stop. That's okay. No, I'm just going to talk unless you tell me to stop. So please interrupt me. The issue of concessions. And so do you have the interior one? Okay, excellent. So Terry's going to be the Vanna White. You see where the concessions is in the facility. So we are planning for concessions. That whole area we're looking at to refine different things. And we originally put the concession stand as it is right now as like your normal concession stand, and maybe, some pizzas and some, think about like the pool, right? So we are looking at some options, because there are some rinks and there has been some interest from the public and the patrons and some commissioners for serving alcohol at this concession area, and also maybe more of a restaurant type environment. And when I say restaurant, I'm not talking like full on restaurant, but maybe there's a cooking, right? There's a pizza oven, you might be grilling, things like that, maybe. It might be even more, limited, depending. And now, when we started talking about this with the architects, they're like, you need a lot more space if you're thinking about that, right, inside. So they're taking that area and looking at, we've already kind of decided that practice area is moving, probably down by the training room, down by the team rooms of the training room. We've also looked at that storage, and we haven't made that decision for sure, storage area behind the rink, and that is, we might be getting rid of that because we can have storage under the bleachers. So there's things like that are moving around. So we're not taking out anything that we've promised the public. We looked at the track area, things like that. So we would have to, we've told them what we're looking at, and we told them, they said, well, you guys have to tell us what you need, and then we'll show you how we can make it work, and we'll tell you a cost, right? So our first step was, can we legally serve alcohol, right? Because concessions we know we can do. But if we step it up a little and offer those other things that, and the reason you do that clearly is there's a lot of people that are hanging out at these facilities, as Brent put it, for 3 or so hours, right? And instead of going down the street to grab something to eat and maybe a drink, they'll stay there, right? Right, and that's the other thing, right? That Wally's, right? Yeah, that Wally's was popular. But so you're seeing this experience more in these types of facilities, that people are staying. And we've seen some, and we do have some pictures of just examples if you want to go there and look at them. But really, the question is, the alcohol and a bigger type of, food service, whatever we can, and we may come back and say, yeah, it's not going to work for the food service. But the alcohol is a big question because there's a lot of steps to go through with that. Our ordinance, just so you know, allows for service of alcohol. We have to go through and get permits, right? We have to get a city permit and a state permit. It's designated basically for all of our facilities, and it can also be permitted outside. The big thing, it has to be within a designated area, and that's parallel to what the city requires as well. So then we looked at our ordinance, check, it's fine. I mean, there's several park districts that serve, at these type of facilities at golf ranges. So it's not an unusual thing. So we then met with the city. We met with the staff at the city, and their bottom, as usual, we fit somewhere not perfectly in their ordinances. So they said we would fit, we asked them, we're like, well, where do we fit, and they said probably the restaurant category. So the big stipulations with the restaurant category is it has to be 51 your sales have to be 51%, and April, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, and 49% alcohol. That's like the designation, right? And they kind of track that by the menu. I think when you put in the application, because we said, well, you're coming around, do we show you receipts? And, and they didn't seem to be that they do, but it's in the application is what we were told. The other big factor is the physical space, right? You have to have it contained. One of our questions was, well, and so we started looking at that space right there, and I don't want to get too much into the details, but 2 of those multi-purpose rooms, that's double the size of the Olympic room that's upstairs now. I mean, it doesn't look like it, right? But so we talked about, do we really need all that space? So we're still going back and forth about that. I think we'll always need meeting space. However, do we want to give up a little of it if it works in the design to be able to do a thing so you could walk through and then also be on the patio with your food and drinks, right? It would be ideal if we could use some of that, a little bit of the lobby as well, and mark it off. And so there's tables in front. The Northbrook Park District does that. They don't have a wall or whatever, and that's a question we asked them. We're like, well, can we do like a half wall or stanchions or something? And, this is not going to be, I'm going to get myself a beer and go walk in the stands. It's got to be contained in whatever that area is that we contain it in. A lot of details to still work through. City's like, it's doable. You can do it. Our next step would be to meet with the mayor and the police chief for the inside. And then we'll talk about the outside when we get to that outside area. So that is, and again, like I said, if we up the restaurant, I mean, we can still do the concessions and do a kicked up concessions and have alcohol, or we can do more of a restaurant. Now, I said, let's talk to the board. If the board says, yes, we want to look into this, we're open to exploring this, then the architects are going to come up with the space that they think that we need for it. And then we would probably meet with the city again and just say, okay, the board says yes, they want to go this way. We think we've got the space for it. This is what we're thinking we'd do. Then we would put an RFP out to area restaurants and providers and say, this is your square footage, this is your space, come back and tell us what you do and your prices, and, and if we found anybody interested, then we would go that route. So does that sum it up? Is there anything? Yeah, you got to get up to the.
The other thing we discussed is which you touched on briefly is that if it is a restaurant, type. There's a lot more storage space needed also. They were
Yeah.
going to figure that out, but they said maybe it would be the size of one of those rooms. So the unknown of, how popular the space is going to be for parties and rentals and other usage. We were kind of like, do we want to give up that space for the restaurant? Because they'd have to have the storage plus the areas for cooking versus, a regular just concession stand, not with the additional food that they would cook on site. So the concession stand would still have, pizzas, warming ovens, nachos, French fries, warming, that type of thing, but not
Like
actual
cooked food.
items that they
Right.
would cook on site.
And are you interested in seeing any of the example type places? Or are you good? Do you understand? Okay. So we can pull those up. And I'm not, just, this is a depiction of, right?
While these, while these are coming up, can I ask a question about the RFP and
Yes.
bringing? So I assume that there was a discussion that it's much more expedient to bring in outside and contract with them as opposed to deciding to be in the restaurant business, the park district
Yes.
being in the restaurant business, correct? And
We're-
hiring people in that field. So we would, there's a way for us to generate revenue from that kind of agreement as well, right?
April, maybe explain real quickly like how that works with Harp and Fiddle, the arrangement. You definitely make more if you're doing it on your own, but that's not our business. Yeah.
It's just complicated to do it on our own. Of course, there are some park districts that do that, but we really would rather focus on the operations versus trying to man this in addition to the rest of the facility. But the arrangement that we have with Harp and Fiddle is a rental arrangement and then a percentage of sales. So I think we'd probably look to something like that, but we'd also see what the other rinks have. This is a little bit different, and we'd see what the arrangements are with the other rinks.
So this, thanks, April. This one is probably the basic. This would be like concessions plus, I would give it, and maybe not even that, but this is Northbrook. And this is probably what ours would look like, as it is, right? And you see those, there's a couple beer tap handles, right? We also asked about this liquor license. We were kind of surprised by it, and it doesn't mean we have to do it. They're like, oh yeah, once you get a liquor license, you can do beer, wine, and all alcohol, which was surprising to us. I'm not saying we do that, but
Well, the other note on that is when you have a contractor, they get all those licenses.
Yeah.
And the liability is on them versus the park district.
yeah, exactly. So. We should have better beer. Right. So this is, and there's another Northbrook picture, but we can go to that next. This is really cool. This is Mount Prospect. Unfortunately, and we talked about this at the meeting the other day, they're like, you want to put it on a second floor? I'm like, we talked about that. I think it was $1 million or something like that. But I said, this is the time to talk about all this, right? This is Mount Prospect, that private rink over on, I don't even know where that was. It was like back in some, yeah, that we toured when we were touring all these facilities. And you see into both the rinks, right? And that this is a pizza place. And I think there's like a pizza oven or something there. And so it wasn't like this extensive menu, right? So we could get a pizza place in here, in ours. But, like the seating, and it's ideal, because you're separated. And so that's very nice. And those, I'm not sure of that.
Those are
Does anybody
restaurant.
remember that? Did they run it out? Yeah. Yeah. That's really nice. So, now, yeah. Now this is I talk about this one all the time. This is for the outdoor area. We'll get back to that. That's the Diversity Driving Range. But this is a rink that Brent, is this the one in West Dundee maybe? I think, or I don't know where this one is, but this is see how it's gated in and it's the outdoor area. Those tables, I think those are little fire pit things in there, which is kind of cool. Now, we have that outdoor patio right now, in that one spot that's in the back, right? So, but this looks like it's more, I don't know where this is in the facility, but that's just an example of like a outdoor seating area. This is Northbrook. So this is, people can go sit in the lobby in this case is what they told us. And so they don't have anything marking that off. That's like a typical lobby, right? so we're like, well, why can't we do something like this? We sent these pictures of the city, and they're like, oh, you need it marked off, right? And they didn't really answer us on the lobby part. So they just said, see what your board says, and then we'll go from there. And then we'll meet with the mayor and the police chief. So anyway, so that's, people do it, this would be the basic, right? The very basic. What else do we have? That's that same facility. This is another facility, I believe this was in Michigan. So the restaurant's inside there. So yeah, that's really what we have on the inside areas, I think. Is there any more on the inside? Oh, no, there's, huh? Oh, this one is, yeah, this is the one he just sent us. I think this is big. Yeah, that one you can't really tell, but that's a indoor, I think that's the indoor of the one with the tables on the outside. I mean, that's like a full-on, I think this is like a 3-sheet rink, wasn't it? This one, yeah. So that's the architect's job, right? I mean, and it may come back and we may say no at that point, right? If the board says, oh yeah, let's do restaurant, let's do the in-between. I personally think, it would be smart to explore, because of the comments we've been hearing from the public, is that we should explore the middle ground one and see what happens with it, right? It doesn't mean we have to, but that would be my recommendation, and I don't know what the staff,
What do you mean by middle ground?
meaning like not just concessions like the pool. Maybe you have, some kind of cooking, you have burgers, or you have
Yeah.
pizzas, you have a pizza oven, or
Okay.
nothing like full-fledged like menus and
I mean,
restaurant.
the wood-fired pizza's pretty, everybody likes
Yeah.
wood-fired pizzas, and it's just like one thing.
Right, and I don't know if we'd need all
Okay.
that cooking stuff for that. Would we need the hood thing? And yeah,
Yeah, you need that.
they have those outdoor ones, but you don't want to do that in the middle of the winter. This winter you could in 40 degrees, but yeah. So what's the feedback, I guess, is what I'm looking for, some kind of direction. We're looking for direction.
So you're just saying you're not deciding. You're saying
We're not
should we
deciding it's going to
try
look
for the
exact.
middle ground.
Yes.
Is that-
Should we go through the process of with the architects and with the city, and see where it leads us?
Is
I guess.
there flexibility? Like, I think of two things. One, I think of how long it took us to find a pool concessionaire that stayed for multiple years.
Mhm.
And I don't know if this is any better.
I don't either. Yeah.
So, you do something like that and you can't find a good
Mhm.
partner. Is there any flexibility of backing out? So that would be one question. Could we turn a storage room back into a multi-purpose room, or
Okay, that's good.
is there some flexibility? Thank God for Harp and Fiddle, because every year it was like
Yeah.
another
Mhm.
disaster. And the other thing, and this may or may not pertain, but we've had issues out there with crowds and, the violence, the one
Yeah.
time or
Well,
whatever.
right.
And
Exactly.
so, that
We
adds fuel to the fire.
yes.
So,
We can limit when they're open if in a case like that,
Right.
we can tell them we do not want you to be open
Right.
for XYZ.
Right.
You know.
but I mean, it makes sense revenue-wise to check into this.
Mhm.
I think the city has been very tough on anybody trying to
Yes.
just serve alcohol.
And this is a new thing for
Yeah,
them,
so
right? The
don't
Park District.
expect it to
I
be
know.
easy, because even if those two people say yes, you have to get through.
I know.
Yeah, you have to get through the rest.
That's why we're starting now if we want to go this direction. Yeah.
So in following up to Cindy's comment, like, what's the timeline for, like, deciding to put a restaurant? Like, when would we get the vendor? Would that be like before construction or
Yes.
after? Okay, so we would have like a set person who wants to do this before.
That's
April.
what I was just going to come up with.
Okay, all
We're
right.
gonna try to put something out ahead of time
Quickly.
so we would
Okay.
know before.
We built it.
Right.
Like last time.
Because according to the staff there's multiple vendors that have already inquired because they know about this plan. It doesn't mean it would come to.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean they'll submit, right?
But,
Yeah.
if we could figure that out early and have somebody commit, then we could work with them specifically to the plan and what their needs would be, and if they backed out, then that wouldn't mean it would be ideal for the next vendor. But
In concessions, no matter if you have, I mean, that's why it's always tricky, right? There's
Yeah.
no easy way to do concessions in these recreation facilities, as why it's a benefit to get a good, to get a vendor in there and the staff not do it. But it doesn't mean it's gonna, it wouldn't change and.
And I feel like it's a little different from the pool. Like I don't go to the pool
For food,
like
well,
for
you're not gonna-
food,
yeah.
like, and I feel like it's always like if my kids are just like dying and they're hangry and I get something for them, where I feel like there's more like hanging out for longer periods of time at an ice rink. I think this is a good idea. I agree with Commissioner Grau that we should look into it. I think it could be a potential perk for people who said that this facility doesn't offer anything for them. There's really no place to go on that side of town, on the
Yeah,
north
they
side of
could
town and
walk in the
west side
park
of
and
the
go sit
town
and,
to
right.
like go and eat or hang out. So it could potentially be something for the people who said my kids don't do sports and I don't play hockey. Like it could be a potential community benefit to a larger slice of the community. So I think we should look into it. I also agree with the concerns like
Mhm.
people getting into fights and alcohol makes it worse. And another thing that I don't remember if we talked about it when I was running, but it's close to Des Plaines River Trail. You know who likes beer? People who ride bikes. And I mean, I think there's potentially, people could potentially come off the trail and have a beer there. And I mean, not like they're not going to have like 10 beers.
No,
Well,
it's
you don't
just
want
a
them to have 10 beers,
No.
but they're going to have a beer and then we don't want biking
Biking
under
under
the,
the
we don't want
influence.
BUIs, but
We need some bike racks in the plan.
we do need bike racks in the plan, but
You just reminded
that
me
could
of
be
something
another audience that I just feel like along the trail there aren't a lot of places to like
stop.
get off quickly and grab something because a
Yeah.
lot of the area next to the river trail is the highway or residential. It's not commercial areas. With Des Plaines is kind of there.
And you're seeing that more and more on some of these bike trails in these cities. There's one in Dallas that's like there's a bike trail and there's a bunch of places along the trail, that people can stop.
Yeah.
So
I was also going to comment to Commissioner Grau's statement about the fights and everything, and that's honestly mostly with under 21. So they're bringing it anyways, and that they wouldn't be a factor in
Yeah.
the bar/restaurant.
right.
So I like the idea. Well, first of all, a couple of comments. There are a couple of places around that some of them have a little more. They're a little bit more on the full blown restaurant side, but they are destination places in in those particular neighborhoods for people. They don't have any. So there's at Tam O'Shanter Golf Course.
Mhm.
There's people in. I forget what the name of the
Yes, it's
the bar is that's there. But that place is packed all the time
mhm.
with people that aren't playing golf, that have nothing to do with golf. They clearly, I don't even think they could walk to the golf cart. So it's
And you're right, that's Niles Park District.
right. And then the driving, I don't mean to make it all about golf, but the indoor
center.
driving range on River Road has and again, it is a little bit bigger scale than this, but the idea that I have friends that go there almost every Friday. They just go, they don't hit balls or anything. They just go and grab a beer and a sandwich and then go about their Friday night. So I think that that's a good thing. And so that middle ground that you were talking about is where I think that's what I'd like to see explored. I don't see that we have the space to add, unless you could get somebody to invest in
Exactly.
in
and
building
build
this
it out.
in $1 million
right.
space on the second floor to
Right.
put out a restaurant. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do think that you'll have difficulties with the liquor part because the city didn't think of
Right.
park districts when they were crafting their liquor ordinances, I think. But I think it's definitely worthwhile. I think did you see any I mean, it seems obvious that it's going to be it's revenue positive thing, and the
Mhm.
way that we would structure it, I guess, because we'd know what the person was paying, so we wouldn't rely on foot traffic.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'd have a contract with
Mhm.
the vendor, so it would be, that would help reduce the cost and maybe make this thing, much more financially viable. So I'm in favor of looking at that sort of middle ground thing. I'm sorry, I've kind of rambled on there.
That's why we're talking about it.
Space is definitely a challenge.
Yes, the space is going to be,
And is there room in the future to bump that area out at all?
well, that's what it was like Etch a Sketch. Anya, I don't know if you remember her, but it was great. She was moving. I think we even have that somewhere, but yeah, they were moving that out or bumping the offices out. But that's all, anytime you add the square footage, you're adding money. But again, like I said, it depends on what we're talking about, right? But this is the time to talk about those things if we're going to do it. It depends if we can afford it, right?
Well, I'm just saying if we can't afford it now, if we can build it in such a way that if it
Later.
takes off,
Mhm.
let's keep in the back of our mind, we might want to expand that if it does well.
Mm-hmm. I know. The layout. It'd be nice to be able to do it like. I mean, I'm just thinking like in the back of that, of the turf field, right? Because then in the back of that, if you look at the outside area, there's nothing right there, right? So we talked about that a little bit, but it's just not the ideal space. Yeah, like right. See, there's where that patio is. It's really small, area. And, they're looking at things right now, like the width of those pathways for fire trucks and for emergency vehicles. And so, we're in reality stage now, like buses turning around the, loop. And so things could, now we're into the nitty gritty. Where, is that where the utility trucks? No. The dumpsters. That's like the back of the house stuff. Terry, do you?
Yeah, I mean, that's.
And the trees are that's not a
trees are just
perfect,
yeah.
example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right now
There's
there's
not
all,
much.
parking and.
Yeah, I don't know if there's
structure.
anything,
There's a lot.
Melissa, to answer your question of value back there. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a spot there for the dumpster and
Well, yeah, I mean, as it is now. It's
right.
So, I mean, again, like I said, if we say, yes, we talked to the city, we're going to tell the architects tomorrow. It sounds like, and we haven't heard from all of you, but yeah, we want to explore this idea. They'll look at the best way to explore that idea and find the space, and then we'll go from there. And we'll talk to the city, and we're like, this is what we're thinking it would look like. What kind of restrictions could we do it? I mean, it's been pretty positive so far with the staff. They said we will, sounds like we can do something. We just have to figure out how, right?
With the city staff or?
Yes, the city staff, right.
And throughout, you kind of mentioned in passing that you heard that people wanted this during the outreach
Yes,
period,
yes.
like
Well,
a lot? or-
Brent is hearing it a lot now, it
Oh,
sounds
okay,
like.
okay.
Like, are you guys, he said that's the biggest thing he's hearing, the
Okay.
request from the patrons.
Okay.
I think there's a lot to be said for those parents that are sitting there for hours on end
Mhm.
and they want to be able to have a distraction. Yeah. And, that they want to not just eat nachos,
Right.
that are, microwaved.
Well, I envision, of course, because I like to think big, like the off the wall or something like that. You can sit there with your computer, you can, an area like that. Now, of course, we've got space constraints for that, but maybe they can design something like that with outdoor or indoor and coffee, like good coffees and things like that. So it's not just your regular, like you said.
Right. I'd hate for us to underdevelop it and then kick ourselves later on
Exactly.
saying, oh boy, we probably missed this one.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of potential for revenue. So
Mhm.
I'm in support of that.
Okay. All right. So that was the big one or one of the big
Let me
ones.
just ask one thing.
Yes.
When we decided to add a concession stand to the pool,
Yes.
it was like 400,000 or 500,000, as I recall. Has that been a good investment or not, or is it going to take forever to pay that back, or what?
You're
what do
not
you
going to
think?
pay for the infrastructure
Yeah,
back
but
on that concession.
was it a big building, for a very little return each year? I know we were very enthused about it.
It's an expectation when you have a facility like that,
Yeah,
and the type of pool we had before.
Oh,
It- you know, people are coming and going a lot quicker. So this is a
Yeah.
different experience.
It is, that's true.
So
Yeah.
it's more of an expectation now in facilities like this
Uh-huh.
than it used to be,
Yeah.
I guess, if that answers your
Would you have done anything, looking back,
Yeah.
what we have now?
So,
Would you have done anything different?
I don't know. I mean, we put that outdoor counter and we don't use, we had big expectations for that, but I mean, they're using it
Yeah.
to the park. It took a while to kick, you know, to come together.
Well, we get all enthused and, you know, so.
Yeah, no, but I think it's for a concession stand for a pool. I don't know, April, what, any different comments on that?
And what kind of hours are we talking for the,
We're not, we haven't gotten there.
okay, all right,
Yeah,
you know,
we,
Hours would
yeah.
would probably depend on the vendor and the
Uh-huh.
events going on.
like a noon to dinner or past dinner like thing?
I don't know. We don't know.
Just wondering.
Probably make a guess at that yet at this point.
Yeah,
in the process.
right.
But
Yeah, the outdoor concession stand, I would say, you know, this past year, they still didn't have enough staff just as we did, so they didn't get to do as much of the outdoor burgers and the things that they had done in the past. But there's always a line there. It's always very busy. You know, our concessionaire, they're very happy and returning, and so
Mhm.
they're doing well. Well, I don't know that they're returning this year, but they've returned, you know, several
Three,
years.
yeah, it's been at least three,
It's
right?
been 3 years.
Yeah.
So they're in talks right now for a hopeful renewal. But yeah, I think there may be a couple things we would have tweaked. I think the park area, it has become
Good.
busy, you know,
Yeah.
of course, just like everything else, the pandemic slowed everything down. But yeah, I think they're happy, and I think we're happy if we went back there. I'm sure there's things we would tweak, but you know, it's more like having even an extra window for just ice cream and things like that.
The things that, yeah,
You know,
'cause-
keeps the line really long for one item sale. Those were the things we've
just wanted to take off our rose-colored glasses and, you know, make sure.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's always, when you build facilities, there's always something, right?
Yeah,
So.
I know, we can't.
Well, and that's why we'd like to get the vendor, you know, on board quickly, because then they can help with it. Like, yeah, if we're taking this on, we want this here, we want this freezer here, this space design like that, you know, so they can have some input, so.
If anything, I wish there was a window on the other side, on the playground side, that if you brought your kids to the playground.
There
you
is
could
a
go-
window there.
There is?
Yeah,
I
that's what
didn't
we're talking
see
about.
it.
Yeah, well, that's what I said. It took a while to kick it.
Oh, the counter.
Yeah,
I've never.
yeah, you can buy things when they're open from there.
Maybe I'm just never there when the pool's open.
Yeah.
No, I've never noticed that. I've never.
Really?
Have you not noticed that?
I don't think I
I know.
either, but
No.
also,
I
like,
They put signage out there. They have signage. Yeah,
I don't take them to the park as much as I, right?
yeah.
Yeah, I've never even.
Oh, for the air, yeah.
I've never seen anybody walk up from the playground and buy something. Ever. So, anyway, I'll be looking at that.
All right, well, advertise that for us, please.
I've never noticed.
Okay,
But
so,
yeah, I mean, like I'm in favor with the majority of the commissioners that I think doing the medium build or the medium road
Mhm.
plan, and because yeah, I mean, like the pool concessions when I've been there with my kids, they're always busy. They're always a line, and I know that personally, I've always been like, oh, I wish they had a little more
mhm.
going on. And plus, I think also in terms of meeting what the city would require in order to give us an alcohol license, if you're able to expand the menu, then you're able to show a greater percentage of the menu items being
Food versus.
And then if you throw in coffee for the grown-ups and cocoa for the children or people like me who don't like coffee, like, and that's right there. Like you have more item potential to offset the percentage of alcohol
Yeah,
on there.
right.
So it
Okay.
seems like the most sensible route to go.
Okay, John, do you have anything? Or are you?
No, I like the idea. I like what Commissioner Coyne said. If a restaurant was able to invest $1 million and build up on that, I think that's it'd be a great idea because
All right.
I like the picture you guys showed of that.
Mhm. I don't know if that's the million. The track, I think, was about $1 million, but you know, it's why we pay the architects, right? Yeah. Elevator might have been $1 million. It was a track. It was a track. This building is 1 story. Yeah, right. Think-
I think we have concession, right?
Yes.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, that's
consensus.
gone. That's where the
We
studio
have
room is.
consensus on the consent.
All right.
Concession.
Let's call everybody to order. We got a lot going on here. Let's go outside. It's the outside area. So so the area we're talking about doesn't have to necessarily be what we, the exact spot that we set on the plans for the referendum. It says outdoor gathering area right there in the middle of the Oaks. But it is my belief that we should try to work something out outside as a gathering area. But what does that mean, right? So really, the direction I need here is, and then we've also heard from Mr. Parsons last week about keeping it all natural and not doing anything but maybe some benches and things, I think was the idea. But so out here, the question for you is, number one, do we give something in terms of a seating area? It allows people to socialize and hang out. Or do we want to minimalize that? And then again, do you want us to check into food and drink service out in this area? As you will see, you can see it someplace. For the driving range, for people that just want to enjoy the natural park, this is a little more tricky, right, to do in terms of that service, because this has to be a contained area, meaning it could be fenced in probably. Let's see, what else did I write down on here? So, we could have, little games and things like that, like we're putting in at Woodland, the ping pong, the bags, the foosball things. We're not putting in foosball, but they have like a foosball table that are meant for the parks. They have things like that. We're doing the bags and the, is it ping pong table at Woodland? Yeah. So that's a trend that's out there too, just to keep people and give them something different to do other than your typical playground. And it's for, more of a minimal cost. So really, I wanted to talk about that. I also wanted to talk about the oaks and, keeping the area natural and doing some native planting in there is what we talked about. We shared Chris's letter with we met she's the landscape architect with White. She was there and she's, that's her thing and she understands. But I said, we need to get a direction on, do we want to do a really minimal and just do like the Adirondack chairs, or do we want to try to push for some kind of a food, drink service out here? Or maybe that could be a future thing, right? So I think that we can we did tell the public, obviously on there, we said passive green outdoor gathering space. And every time we went out, we had it on our script. It was, we're not sure what that's going to mean. Maybe just some chairs out there, someplace to, hang out. Fire pit was brought up. Now, we get really nervous about fire pits when they're not supervised, of course, with our people. But they, you can bring them in and out. I mean, they have them where you can bring out something if there's staff there and bring them back in. But that's just other options. I'm just throwing out different things that you may see. Can you pull up that picture from the diversity? This is, I love, John and I hang out at this diversity driving range, but this place is always packed. I don't think we would go to this extreme, but it's pretty simple except for the restaurant service. So the driving range is to the right of this. And so people are always there with their golf clubs, and after golfing, from the walking trail, there's garden, like a little garden area that people plant there. And it's really simple. There's just tables, and then there's another. But the thing on the left, it's more like a trellis, which I kind of like, even if we don't do, it's a shade area. And, maybe you put some chairs under something like that versus your typical shelter, even if we didn't do food. So you see the back of that is a bar. And that's funny. That's John in the picture with the hat on. I just realized that. He's going to love that. But so there's just like a little bar right there. And then behind that, I don't have a picture of that, it's a Bacino's, the pizza place. They make pizzas out there. It's super small. But that's their food service out of that. So, you know, it's kind of a nice area. The place is, like I said, it's always packed and it's just pretty simple. But it is, I think we'd have a hard time getting this through the city, and we may want to concentrate on the indoor space first and then attack this, something like this, if the board's interested later. Can you go to the next, there's another picture of this, and then there's one at one of that just shelter on the lakefront. You're doing such a good job, Terry. I thought there was one that showed more like the chairs just sitting around that area, but maybe not. Okay, yeah. This is right at the lake, you know, that lakefront restaurant. I don't know if you're familiar. It's an old Park District building. It's beautiful. But they put this out in the park, and they literally just serve drinks out there, waters and Cokes and, you know, drinks. And they put this like little stanchion fence around and Adirondack chairs out there. And I mean, of course, it's a beautiful view past that. It's a lake, you know, it's the city view, but again, it's right on the bike path. It's very, you know, it's very popular. So, you know, those are some kind of conceptual things. Or we can just go to the typical shelter, you know, like we've got in our other parks. We could put that somewhere out in that area. Or we can just do like chairs and stuff. So I guess the question is, do you want us to try to go for food and drinks out there, or we skip that for now and just do like seating area?
I guess my thought is, well, on the one hand, I feel like that would be a revenue generator, especially from the golf crowd.
Mhm.
On the other hand, I'm kind of concerned about like all the garbage that would generate right by the Oaks, because we know a lot of
Mhm.
people just aren't really considerate about where they put their plastic cups and whatnot. So I mean, I guess that would make me a little nervous. I mean, it's one of those things where I like the idea if we're just talking about from a monetary perspective, but from a like trying to be stewards of the Oaks that we're leaving, I'm a little nervous about that. And so, and also I just think there's going to be so many moving parts to deal with the indoor concession
Mhm.
that I feel that I would be in favor of like having some sort of little shelter that maybe they could bring drinks out to in a future point if, you know, that's what the board wants to do, but that for right now it'd be better to focus on the indoor concessions.
Okay.
So.
And I forgot to mention before, we did talk, Brent had a great idea at our meeting, our pre-meeting to the architect meeting, for a food truck out there, you know, that you put at the parking lot. You know, you designate a spot on the parking lot and you do a food truck. Now, we got a little pushback on that from the city. They're directing us to the health department supervisor, that they said that we may want to think about like our own truck and that we serve on our own, which we haven't explored that and dug into that yet with the city staff. But I mean, to me, I think if you're going to do anything out there, I thought a food truck was a really good idea. If you could get somebody that would do a food truck. A rotating, yeah. I know, right. And maybe you do without alcohol service, because the whole alcohol service in the park, this city is, I don't know if they're ready for that yet. Although everybody, if you have a rental, they, you know.
So I have a thought. First of all, I think the passive green gathering space should be a passive green gathering space, not an outdoor bar or what. I want an outdoor bar. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it should necessarily be in that space, because
Right.
my silly little vision is that I think I've bored Terry with to tears, is that kind of like you have at the driving range where you hang out, Diversity. I couldn't remember it. I can see that inside the fencing of the driving range along Oakton, and that would tie nicely to my vision of having ice, refrigerated ice from late November until March,
Right.
On the driving range, and then we roll that up in the spring for the driving range. So you'd be able to have that outdoor concession available year-round, and people would be skating and come over and have a beer. You could have I don't know if we run natural gas lines, but you could have natural gas heat
Mhm.
out there, if
Heaters, yeah.
heaters or even the flaming ones. But obviously then you can control that because
Right.
you have power. It's not just like a bonfire. So, but all of that is great. But all of that is not in this budget that we're talking about. So I think
Right.
I wouldn't want to, and that goes way off of what we've already been asked by the taxpayers to do in
Right.
this referendum. So that would be something that I think I would like to see a longer term vision plan that says we're going to do that, or we want to do that, but we're going to look to that. And in the meantime, for this purpose of this argument, I would say don't do anything. But I do think that to the extent that we can give maximum access underneath the oaks without any detriment to the trees is something that we should look at. And I don't know that Mr. Parson or has looked at the idea of how to make that possible, as opposed to, I think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, we want to preserve those trees. Everybody,
Right.
I think, around this
Yes.
circle here, this table, wants to preserve those trees. But there may be some ways to make that space more accessible without endangering them. And we would have to look at those options.
And that's what like I said, the white, they're very conscientious of that. They understand the issue. And so this is, I mean, so far, great direction. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but, and they can come up with maybe some natural looking shelter type thing, with shade. Now, there's a lot of shade out there already, but maybe there's a space for it.
Shade. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of a Jens Jensen council ring. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone, but a circular low wall kind of thing that you can sit on, that's often nestled in natural areas, and then you can have a path to it, and you can actually grow plants in that area, not have grass. And I've often thought that we could have a Wildwood Part 2 out there. That is a whole ecosystem in itself. And if we plant it, you can program out there. And if you have a gathering area where you can have classes or whatever, or people can just, and if they don't want to go into the rink, they can sit out there. And
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
the intent was
Yeah, so
originally,
not
right?
even well, what I'm thinking, and it just came to my mind when you were saying all that, I love the idea of having a gathering area, but I'm like, where the heck are you going to put it that you're not impacting those trees? And that's all Terry and I have talked about. That area that you're talking about, it really needs to be cleaned up. But I think like a council ring, and she'll know what I'm talking about, in there with like maybe a gravel path or something, and then plantings around it, and even signage. So
Is a council ring, that's not concrete, right? You're talking,
it's hardscape.
it's hardscape?
Yeah,
Okay.
but
So
stone. Yeah.
we were,
Given.
one of the mediums we were talking about out there for any pathways would be probably decomposed granite, rotten granite, because it doesn't have the lime impact on the trees. It doesn't have the compaction, so that's.
Yeah, she did mention that granite.
But it would still
Is that
be,
what it is?
yeah,
Crushed granite? I'd never heard of that.
They have those at the council ring. They have one at the Botanic Garden.
Mhm.
Okay.
Classes in there, and it's just very passive.
Yeah.
But it's nice for a group because you're all facing each other. It's
Okay.
round.
And so no chairs you want to put out there,
Well,
like,
you can sit on it.
Yeah.
It's about seat height, and you just sit on it.
You like kind of a landscape wall, a seating wall
Mhm.
that you could.
I mean, it doesn't have to be that, but it's just that
Mhm.
a concept, right?
No.
Shelter.
No, this is so.
That's,
this
I know,
is
because
a
I'm like a
private
real shelter. I don't know if you really need out there because it's so shady already, right? Yeah.
No, I never saw a shelter out there. It's very pleasant under those.
So a pathway through that, as long as it's the right material, we're okay with.
Well, to whatever you're drawing people to.
Right,
But
because,
it fits with that aesthetic
Mhm.
of just having a natural area.
great, okay. And we also talked about maybe we could get rid of some of Terry had this idea, the pathway that runs along the driving range there, right there. Maybe there's something we can do to not even put as much pathway, and if we did it, it would be that crushed granite type thing. Because, I said, what we promised is a half-mile loop. We've got to do the half-mile loop. But maybe it could connect to that other one along the turf right there, right? So these are details that we're starting to get into now, so. Yeah, if you have pictures of things, we love pictures too. Oh, yeah,
just
something
make
like this.
Make it an area that looks more natural.
Okay.
in general.
Jens Jansen. Jens Jansen.
I'm looking at the one in Highland Park. Like, it's beautiful.
Yeah, they're pretty.
Here, can you put it up on is this the same thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It said it's in Jens Jensen's garden.
Council ring,
I
yeah.
always say John's. Sorry.
Okay, I like that.
Well, it's
You know
a
what they're talking
Chicago
about.
thing, right? He's from Chicago, I think.
She's looking at the same,
There's an elementary school along 290
And they call it Jens.
yeah, he's an
No,
architect.
they say it.
For this, it is? Was that?
He was the original landscape architect for the
Here.
property we're on right now.
Really?
I thought so.
Maybe.
I thought so, but what they were doing, some of the historical stuff was they were looking to see if there was any remnants of the original, and I thought that's what they were.
It was some famous landscape architect, and maybe it was him.
I'd have to look back.
Well, because that came up after they had to save that building, and then this came up at the 11th hour. They're like, oh, hold on. Well, that's when they got the new staff member down in Springfield and almost made us, they had to stop and do a whole evaluation to make sure there was no landscaping done by this famous, I think this is the guy, yeah.
Yeah, there's not many famous landscape architects. It's probably him.
Probably him, probably some famous, yeah.
Well, he was.
So Melissa, send us, if it's different than this one, it's the same thing, okay. Is everybody on board with that thought process? Yeah. Okay, great. This is going very well. It's too easy. Yeah, well, I'm about to. Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Let's talk about the electronic sign for a minute. That came up from Commissioner Bendy. We did not, I don't even know if we had in the budget for any signage, but, whatever. It's probably in that FF&E somewhere. Yeah, similar to what we have, but it would be a new one, right? It wouldn't be electronic. However, if we want to go down the path of electronic, we're open to that. There's no city code that allows that right now, if you're familiar with that. So that would be another thing that we would be going for a variance. And
I know.
just a couple points about the electronic sign. The staff was very interested in it because they didn't have to change it. So we are not thinking, with the letters, right? That the current sign is outdated and it's time for it to, go away. But the issues will become, I'm sure, we're doing a traffic study anyway. We're required to do that. The setback will be an issue. There's things about setback for everything, right? And it's in a residential, there's houses like right across the street from that.
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges would be the light that
Yeah.
will emit, because if it's too close to the street, it's going to put out possibly more than 0.1 foot candles, and so that could be one of the things they hang on. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that how that works itself out. But I think what we had discussed and what Gail was getting to is that we talked as a staff and as a group, and even with the architects, that this was something that we thought that we if the board was interested in moving forward with, we could at this time, but we need to be prepared to go in, have this as part of it, because we're gonna have to go in for
Everything.
like it's gonna be a plan use development. We're gonna have a lot of different items on there, and I think we need to gauge the interest of whatever board we are first in front of, and if that seems like it's gonna be a real hang up, we would hate to stall the project out on that individual thing. Unfortunately, so I think we can take a stab at it and go for it, but we've got to be ready to abandon it in favor of the overall project, if that's what seems like it makes sense.
Time to get a sign.
We have time to get a sign, but the challenge is right now is that I don't know that we can go in with that now separately without the whole site plan. So at what point when we go into the site plan, because we're changing the whole property. So they're going to just tell us, bring it when you do the site plan.
Well,
And so we'll do that and we'll bring it in if the board's interested in us doing that. But if we get a sense that, hey, look, you're fighting a real uphill battle here, what we don't want to do is
So the whole project.
lose a whole schedule of a project over a sign that's not even permitted, and we're fighting hard for that one piece, because I don't think that's what the public was looking for us to
Rick
do when they
Biaggi will
passed the
help us.
referendum. So, well,
I
that's
think-
great, but
I think what we should do is see what the consensus is
Of the board,
though, like
yeah.
who actually is that actually something that everybody wants?
Right, that's what we're doing tonight. And so
We go too far down into the weeds.
And one thing I want to add to that is that we're not talking about a sign that we would go for advertising for, because this is not the, Margaret, we've been through this, and. It's not going to be at that scale. Right. I mean, if we get people,
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God, they would never
Yeah.
let us sell advertising.
no. No.
Well, and plus we don't want some tacky monstrosity.
No, and I mean, the people that do that, they are on major expressway, like Hoffman Estates has one, right? And it's right on the expressway there, so they sell advertising, and they have a hard time. It's billboard size. We're not talking that,
This
just
is
to
like mother-daughter
informational,
scrolling
yeah,
slider.
right, scrolling ice show and, that.
Yeah, it's a person who works in a school district where we've got multiple different sites. We've got some schools that just have the old style that's stationary. You have to physically get out there, and it's the same message, literally sometimes for 2 months at a time, because no one wants to get out there in January and change it. It
Does freeze
yeah.
shut. They freeze shut.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost useless because it's not taking advantage of advertising the events that are going to be coming up that weekend, or other things that are worthwhile about registration or
The
whatever.
spelling's wrong, or no.
Yeah, and you can remotely access these things through your website, and it really, you get your money's worth when you have an electronic sign that you don't have to depend on.
They can do it
somebody
from the
to go
computer.
out. Yeah,
right.
right. So I would be in favor if, Terry, as you say, it's either now, when we hand them the plan, and again, if we have to abandon that for the sake of the bigger project, I would be in favor of that.
I'm not sure why we can't start talking to them a little bit about it.
Well, there's a process. We
Yeah,
will.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure.
How
it'll
about we
take
hear from
Well, that's why we're asking, because we would go in with it, with the site plan review.
So I'm not sure if I want to put my remarks in how I don't really like electronic signs and don't think it's really appropriate for that park, or if I should talk about that I don't really want to die on the hill of trying to force an electronic sign through the city council. They, I don't usually like, I mean, it was a different city council when they refused to put up a similar kind of sign in front of Main South, so maybe they'd be more inclined to do that, but they tried, District 207 tried to put a sign that would simply say, hey, there's a play today, with a scroll on the bottom, and they said no. And they said, well, because it's a lot of light pollution. And they said, well, no, we're on D Road. There's a forest on the other side. What's the problem? So that got nixed.
They,
know
however,
that-
got a scoreboard sign. I mean, that is an electronic sign, but
Well, the scoreboard is
Yeah.
the scoreboard, and that's football, and that might be a whole different kettle of fish. But when they wanted to put a sign out in front of the auditorium on D Road, which is what this park sign would be, they flat out said
Yes,
no.
they said no.
So I don't know if, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't assume that they might change their mind. I don't really like the aesthetic of those signs. I don't think, but then again, I'm not going to die on that hill either. So if I think I like what Terry had to say is, if we find out what it costs and we find a sign that is visually appealing and that staff can change easily and will do so, and we can get it passed, that's fine. But I don't want the whole project to hinge on that. So I think that's my take. I don't know if that really gives you a consensus. I would say, if we were saying, do we want an electronic sign? My say is no. But if we're saying, if everybody is, if the consensus goes the other way, like Commissioner Bowe said, we might, I think at a minimum, we just have to listen to what, we can't have the whole project contingent on it.
They do have them. I don't know what picture that Joan's got there, but they've got natural looking ones as well.
Monument ones? Monument.
Yes, more monument.
Wouldn't you be more inclined for a monument one at Oakton as opposed to like
They're more expensive, like the ones that look like with the rocks and stuff, right? Yeah, there's a
By the way,
faux rock.
And one last thing, the city didn't want us to put up a piece of artwork basically on the side of South Park. So I'm not 100% sure that they're going to embrace the idea of an electronic sign on Oakton.
Right.
there's new council people there, and there's going to be new council people. They might be more receptive to.
Okay.
How about if we hear from everybody? before-
Yeah, let's hear from everyone.
Commissioner Hulting.
I mean, I'm probably agnostic to slightly negative on the sign. I'd like to hear more about the benefits that staff see. I mean, obviously you get the word out about events, and I'd like to hear about the pros of having. I'd like a little bit more information on that. I'd be concerned about the impact of the people who live across the street. Those houses are really close to the street, because I assume like Oakton used to be a 2-lane and they widened it. So like, I don't know if I'd want to be a person who's like living right there, but I'm kind of neutral, and I wouldn't want this to hold the project back at all. So yeah, I don't have super strong feelings either way. Yeah.
Well, I would say I'm in agreement with Commissioner Coyne's comments, especially if we're talking about like preserving some of the, like going for a more natural aesthetic for the gathering place. I think it would be cool to have something that kind of tied in with a more natural aesthetic, with all the trees that are there, and something that, I'm concerned about adding a cost, because I mean, if we're going to talk about where we expend our resources in terms of cost and where we expend our resources in terms of negotiating with the city, I would rather spend the time, energy, and money on talking about something like having a nicer, like the mid-level concession, than an electronic sign. Like, I just don't, like there's certain businesses where electronic signs do draw in more customers, right? Like, I'm driving on Tui, I'm hungry, I see an electronic sign for a bakery, there's a good chance I may stop there, right? Like, there's certain things where electronic signs are very helpful in that regard, and I don't think this makes sense in terms of that. Like, the people aren't going to be randomly driving down Oakton, paying close enough attention, and then being like, you know what? I think I'm going to go purchase a few hours of ice skate, right? Like, it's just not.
They might go to the restaurant from it, though, technically.
But signs can do anything for the park district, just like we do at Centennial. I'd like to hear what Margaret thinks, frankly.
You want to get up on the microphone, please? See, I was helping you out.
I do think they are effective. Just even the Centennial sign being static right now over the holidays, we advertised the gift cards. We had people walk in for gift cards, like to purchase them as gifts. When we did personal training, she had people off the street coming in asking about personal training. So they are effective. It wouldn't just be limited to messages about Oakton. It would be the park district as a whole. But I concur with Terry. I wouldn't want to hold up the whole project to push the sign through. And I know it will be a battle with this city, but I think it's worth exploring it at this point.
I mean, I definitely remember sitting in on a city council meeting where there was a huge fight, even to put like a small sign at like a bus stop to give people electronic information, right? Like,
Right.
right? You remember? Were you there at that meeting?
Yeah, I think
yeah,
it.
I mean, like,
It's not a designated. They just let you have it, right? It's
right,
not.
and like
yeah.
I said,
It's
and
gonna be a fight.
And what would be the cost comparison for doing an electronic sign versus doing an?
It really matters what kind of
Signs.
sign
Right, I
you're
mean-
doing in either case. So it's really hard to give out a price. I'm not going to try to throw out a price.
We can get it, and this is one that I don't think at this meeting, we could bring you back some information on costs of signs or,
It's really hard to, though,
okay,
without knowing what we really want.
right.
Well, I have no problem with exploring it and exploring costs and
Okay.
like assessing how hard the city's gonna
Yeah, okay.
like feel them out.
I think that's a
I don't have
consensus.
problem.
John, you,
Yeah, no, I think it's worth exploring. I like Terry, I agree with you. I don't think that this is one of those things we hold up this project for 2 years for a sign, but I mean, in full disclosure, I have a monument sign in front of my office. It's not electronic, but it'd be really nice to be able to advertise some things, but
Mhm.
just a light up sign and that's it.
allowable right
And
now.
we lost the South Park sign, and I thought that was a real shame. I think that
I think fell apart.
we need to plan for it. Within the next 10 years, we're going to have a sign there. That's the way I look at it, and we tell the city this is what eventually we would like to do. That's how I feel about
Mhm.
it. But you don't have to say nothing can happen because of a sign. That's not why people voted for this referendum.
Right.
So,
Okay.
There's going to be a lot of increased participation, profitability, and you can sell like we did at South Park. 25 years ago, they said it was sponsored by a bank. Whatever that bank was on the corner of Devon. Yeah, and so that was there. They bought it, and so that can be the cost can be offset. So, it's what will if we start working with the city, they're going to start to think about parameters of the size of the sign. A 3x8 is pretty small. 10 feet would be nicer. These, I don't know, to me, these monument signs, I think it would go quite well. And then they said, you only need I talked to someone, you need a medium resolution. You don't need a high resolution where you might have that for
The billboard ones.
billboard, or car dealerships. He mentioned that they want that high resolution that you can really see stuff. At night, the signs last about 10 years. They have, as far as the neighbors, if you turn it on dark, then it's not as obnoxious. But if you had it on white all the time during the night, they would see that. But so there's ways to program it, obviously, to so the neighbors are always going to complain too. So but wouldn't that be beautiful to to say what's going on, when's it going to open, our little logo on top, and then you get the sign in the bottom. It's really nice, and the messaging, oh my, it's invaluable to get this done. So I guess I'm not clear. Why would you think this would get held up? I mean, if
It's not allowable right now in the
right,
city.
I know that,
Right.
but then you start going for that variance. That's what.
Well, right, that's what we're saying. We've
Yeah.
got several variances that we'd be going for anyway.
Right.
So this would be one of them,
Yeah, one of
right?
Yeah, but if that variance gets
Oh.
denied,
Declined,
we
right.
keep fighting it. Like that's
Right.
where we say, like,
Well,
every
think we-
other variance got passed, and this is the only one.
build a sign that we can do it eventually because it's going to come eventually.
It will come eventually, and you'll need electricity to there. So I don't know.
All right, we'll work through the process and we'll bring it
So
back
I
and
I
let you
think
know what they say.
regardless, that
Yeah.
sign would have light, so the
Yeah.
electricity would always
Right.
be pulled there.
Yeah.
It might be the network that.
I mean, we have a sign out here. We could design it like this. It's got spotlights on it and just go in with something that looks like this and make it electronic. That's what I would do. That's what we're going to do at Centennial. Yeah, I don't know. We might. We have those bricks in the back still.
Park Ridge Historical Society had Brickton bricks and a couple pallets of that. So you never know what
All
they're,
right.
how they're doing with it. But
So we have that direction. The next one, this is a discussion I really, this is about the refrigerant. We have a meeting with the ICE engineer on Monday, just to run through again, for those of you were here when we, way back when, they were talking about like some different options, right, other than R22. It appears, and Terry knows more about this, but that all the the majority of the rings are going with ammonia. And this is what, and I said, before we do that, I want to make sure that I understand if there's any options. And because at the time, the other options didn't seem viable, but I said, maybe they've progressed. Craig said that they have not. And that apparently ammonia uses the least amount of energy and power, right, Terry? That's what we were told the other day. They have all this new technology for controlling it, and making sure it's not running when, it's not needed, and you can control that a lot tighter, so it's energy efficient. He said CO2 is not as efficient. And I said, well, I just want to hear all of this from the engineer and just hear, are there any other options out there? Is there anything else happening with this? And that's why we're having this meeting on Monday. So that is another bigger item, but I just want to make sure that the board is like, once we hear this and we hear, yeah, this is it, like, are you okay with us just going forward with that if it is ammonia? That's what I wanted to know.
Surprising, because I was in on those
Surprised too.
discussions.
I know. It seemed
and
like
there was
something would
all these
progress.
Emerging
Right.
technologies.
And this is the same guy, so that's why I'm curious. You want to add to that, Terry? Is there
I
anything?
mean, I was just gonna, point out that, even our current, system with the R22, that product that it uses is not good for the environment. First of all, that's why it's been discontinued, but it also is hazardous to people's health. So can asphyxiate them immediately. So I
We're
think,
improving it.
I think a lot of people, but I know a lot
know.
of people, I think they have this, with
Talked
ammonia,
about
like
this,
people
yeah.
have smelled ammonia, they're familiar with ammonia, so they're easily able to relate to it. And I think people can have an emotion attached to that because it's a smell. You have no idea what R22 smells, looks like, tastes like, or anything else. So it's hard to assign that same sense of feeling to that concern, but it's just as deadly. So
Yeah, but there's been like, it's just as deadly.
like it'll
It is bad.
yeah, no,
And he said they have the ventilation and the
Yeah,
system set up that it's
that
very
is primarily
complex.
what every rink is going with, and a lot of it revolves around just overall sustainability. And by sustainability, one, to Gail's point, the electrical usage, the heat, it does really good at pulling the heat out of, which is what causes it to freeze. So it's good in that regard. But beyond that, it's also a very readily available product, and so there's not a supply or demand issue. It's there's the product is available. So so that kind of works
I have
into
no
it
idea.
as well. So
Any other comments on that topic? Okay, great. Moving along, the last one I have, isn't this fun? Is a discussion on sustainability in general. So the architects, I'm going to turn this to Terry because he speaks much more eloquently about it than I do, but they went through a really good overall discussion and kind of want direction on, do we want to go for certifications, or do we want to go with just being cognizant of everything that we put in there? They have this whole team. They will meet on everything we do. They will look at the sustainable way to do it. Are we more interested in that? And then I'll turn it to Terry to add to that.
no, I mean that was a great summary of it. Really, that
Quick summary.
very nice and simple.
They said net zero costs like 10% more than your budget, and it maybe even more. She said there's so many other things you can do, inside ComEd incentives. They talked about a really cool new, was it a new company that does, and they had done this at the Bolingbrook Nature Center, but they physically did a lot of this. But I guess there's now a company that does this that can take some of the trees that are coming down and incorporate them into the building, in different ways, things like that.
Yeah, so the overall conversation was, how important is it for us to have that LEED
Plaque.
on the sign, on the building, or the
It's BS.
right? And so
And it's a lot of hoops.
A lot of
Let's-
work.
Let's like really do something and not go for a plaque.
That was their question.
yeah, and that
Right.
was really their question, was like,
Plaque doesn't mean diddly.
Okay, we just wanted,
That's good to know.
yeah.
It's true. I mean, so.
And
so
she is
we
doing a
decide-
seminar on it. They did it with Northbrook, but it's a lot of
I
money.
agree.
And yeah, they were leaning for a building like this because of what we have now. And then the structure we're adding is it's metal, right? The,
Yeah.
so it is it's not a full-fledged like
They said there'd
concrete
be- yeah, there'd
building.
be a
There
lot
would
of
be
challenges
costs.
and to be able to get, I think the
Yeah.
net zero, they said would almost be impossible with the type of structure that we've planned for.
So you'd have to
We would
purse
have
it
to
out and do it
change
on.
out into like a concrete prefab building and basically take away any potential air gap there might possibly be on the
I'm
structure.
only speaking for myself, and I know there are other opinions here, but Lutheran General added that children's wing, and they were LEED certified, and they did all this complicated landscaping. They never took care of it.
It's a constant, they
it's a
said. You have
mess.
to like continually report in, and then you don't get the money until you prove
Yeah.
Yeah,
all
and
this. It sounds like,
and it sounds wonderful, but if you're not maintaining it, if you don't, it's just I've heard other people who have done these buildings, and it's really like greenwashing in a way to be LEED certified now.
and the net zero, the same kind of
Well,
thing.
net zero would be awesome, but we don't have money for net zero.
Right.
No, and
Do we?
the structures are kind of not really like we didn't budget the money to put the types of
Because we
buildings.
didn't have the money to do
Right.
that.
Right.
I would
Right.
love net
They said, she
zero.
said, that's where they said 10% more at
That's-
least on your
That's a
budget.
real thing. Net zero is a real thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll add a little nuance to that. I think LEED comes from a good place. And the things that LEED gives points for come from a good place. And I think it has driven change in the building industry, but it's very expensive. And from an energy standpoint, like you can build this fancy LEED building with all these features on it, but if you're not operating the building correctly,
Mhm.
it isn't sustainable. You have to like operate the building as if it's supposed to be. So getting LEED isn't important to me. I wouldn't say it's like all hooey, but I don't think it's worth the cost. And just because a building is LEED doesn't mean it has the lowest possible impact on the environment. So as long as they're like thinking sustainably, thinking about making it as efficient as possible and
Okay.
considering it in the decisions, that's fine with me. I know LEED can be very costly, not only just for like the paperwork part of it, but for the materials part of it too. So
Yeah, I would definitely defer to the opinions of Commissioner Grau and
Me
Commissioner
too.
Halting on this. And it sounds like it'd be better to spend our resources actually making these nice sustainable features than being concerned about going for a specific certification.
Yes. Yes.
I think the certification is great if you didn't know where you were going to go, maybe, if you didn't know what to do. But we have an architect and other
They're
people
known for
involved in
that,
this process
right.
that know what we need to do. So then it becomes kind of a virtue signal, like, hey, look at us, we have this, okay? And I don't necessarily want to be the town that says, hey, look at us, we do this. I want to be the town that just does this. So I'd like to have the sustainability features built into this project, and because they're the right thing to do, not because we've checked off a box and said, hey, look at us.
But that being said, then there's energy efficiency, there's water efficiency, there's low VOC materials that are important to the health and the well-being of the people that are existing within the building. Like those things are pushed by LEED, and those are all good things, and we can consider those.
And that's what
Yeah,
they were talking
yeah,
about,
yeah,
all
I
of
know.
those things.
I'm just
Putting it in.
I'm adding.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm cynical. And I mean, really, if you look like you have an indoor ice rink and an indoor turf field, there's nothing green about either of those things. So let's just
Turf,
let's
which
just-
is the next subject.
It's not green. It might be the
I'm kidding.
color
It's
green.
I was kidding.
Okay, but let's
But-
do the best darn job we can do with what we're trying to do.
Okay.
And not try and impress anybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, and when we're done doing all that great job, instead of the LEED sign, we got Margaret to go brag about it.
Right.
So.
Right. You can get electric. The last, and I don't want to get into the type of turf right now, but just as I've said to the board, that was one of the things that Craig said. They all know that we're gonna spend some time looking at a couple different options on this turf. And if there's a couple commissioners that would like to volunteer and do that, that have the time to do that and go to these, I mean, I'm sure we'll pick like 2 or 3 places, talk to the operator, say, what do you use? What are the challenges? What do you have? We're going to get the affiliates that will use this facility involved with that. And we also, you know, we did talk about doing a public meeting, but we don't think it's smart to do a public meeting till we've made some of these, you know, decisions to the point where we're all comfortable with them. And then if there's this big outcry, we can talk again about it, right? So I just wanted to say that. I don't want to get into the whole discussion about the turf. We've been there and we'll go there again. So is there any other major items? Those were on our list. And of course, we will come back to you throughout this process, you know, as we move through these items, if there's big things, I mean, if anything changes, right, from what we've told the public or you know, what we need to do. They did tell me they're putting costs together, and these things matter, of course, and they're digging in and putting this price together for the guaranteed maximum price. And they said, I mean, I think Craig said it could be high, but it, you know, that's before they go to bid. And so there's a lot of steps. We were all so impressed with, it was a great meeting, very collaborative, experts in all different areas. The engineer was there talking about, will we have buses? Will we have I mean, it's like they're asking us these questions about leading us, like, you got to think about this. They're already talking to the city. They're talking to Dirk about the contract. So I think we made the right decision, and, you know, there's a lot of work to do, but it's exciting work. And, you know.
I just want to say one more thing. That is a railroad track running around
Yeah.
the back of the building. So that is
Right.
never really going to be that pretty.
No.
In my opinion.
No.
So, like, I don't know who's been back there, but I've been
Oh,
back
yeah.
there. So
It'll be prettier than it is now.
Oh, it sure will. It looks really bad now. So, I mean, you know, on paper it looks great, but it's
No, I know.
never going to be great. But maybe we could even plant up the banks or something. Who knows?
Yeah. Down the road, probably.
It's just such a weird parcel.
Yes, it is. It's a challenging shape to work within. So, all right. I think we got the direction we need. I appreciate it and appreciate the input. Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to provide the input.
Of course.
I appreciate, no.
Was it the executive director?
I've done my report.
Are we on D for finance? All right, I might as well kick it off. I'll hand it over to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Thank you, Treasurer Bowe. My written report begins on page 16 of your packet. So if anyone has any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, I'll try to be brief with the report by funds. As noted in the written report, the cash position is below budget due to that delay in property taxes. And then the next page, our performance report does show the same trends as in recent months. But as I've also reported in the written report, we have begun getting those property tax receipts in. So I am hoping to get some investments made by the end of this month. And then with I expect we'll get another distribution at the end of the month and or in early February, so we'll probably do a little more than in February as well. Going on to the report by funds, you can see that the budgeted taxes not yet received, I'm sorry, my notes are a little small here. On page 22, we can see that when those budgeted taxes not yet received are recorded, our results are expected to be better than budgeted. And we are showing, even in the budget and the all funds there, that negative amount. I just wanted to point out that that is due to the budgeted drawdown in the capital fund. So the general fund shows, and the recreation funds show those similar trends. And then if you look at the capital fund, again, those negative expenses are below budget, but we still expect accruals, including grant and TIF revenues. So.
I did have a question about that. I looked at that page finally for the first time in who knows how long.
Mhm.
Are we still waiting for a payout from the state of 800,000 or
So
grant?
we budgeted in the capital fund for assuming that the Woodland grant, if it was completed, that we would receive 200. So the way the OSLED grants work, we get half of it up front and then the other half once the project's completed. So part of that is the 200 for Woodland. We estimated another 200 potential if we should get the Hinckley grant. We did get the Hinckley grant, and I'm happy to report that we just last week received the first 200,000. So that amount will be accrued. And I've talked to the city about putting in for our TIF amounts. We're waiting on our regular TIF payment because they're waiting on getting property taxes as well. So we're looking at, and the draw date for the next piece is February 1st. So he'd like to have one request, and we'll accrue back the 22 piece there. And so that's kind of the other part of it. So we won't get 200,000 because we won't have gotten the Woodland second half yet. But
So the city part is the amount that we're requesting for the improvements at Hinckley.
yes, for the lighting,
Yes.
because that project was completed,
Right.
and whatever we have to date for the Hinckley
And
project.
are we almost totally
Close.
to zero? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I haven't, another reason to kind of get through this month is to see if we have anything else, any other expenses that we've accrued. The last time I looked at the numbers, it looked like we had about 40 or 50,000 that I couldn't identify expenses for. So,
Graffiti removal isn't a capital expense.
so then the operating fund again shows the same, and we are still accruing, as we mentioned, those revenues and expenses. We're still assigning the ADA expenses from capital, and we budget about 200,000 for that. So there's a lot of moving numbers yet still, but as I put in my written report, I do expect that we will at least meet. It was close to 700,000, I think, that we expect to transfer to capital. The other thing I wanted to point out on the projections is that I've updated these with the 23 budget, and I've also included the assumption of issuing the referendum bonds and the limited bonds, and included that in the projected cash balance.
How come the graph looks so tight compared to usual?
Because when I added in that 33.4 million, it expanded the scale.
Oh.
So same. Exactly.
Things might be closer than
Exactly.
in your mirror.
So yeah. So when you have a whole lot of money, big difference is not as big. Yeah.
So it'll look like that for the next couple of years?
Yeah, and we could think about splitting it back up again, right? To move the capital on one graph and operating on another. So we'll think about that. We have a lot going on in finance right now.
Always, always something, Sandra.
Yeah.
The minute she walks out.
Any other thoughts or questions? Thanks.
Thank you. So I move to approve the payment vouchers in the total of $996,752.73.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call?
Commissioner Bendy? Yes. Commissioner Bowe?
Yes.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Hulting?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
Okay, and with that, I'll pass it over to Commissioner Coyne.
And I will quickly pass it over to Superintendent Armour.
Thank you. I'll give some highlights from the report. So December is, of course, always busy with many holiday events, Santa, Elf, Grinch, New Year's, you name it. And we did include some highlights from the Customer Experience Committee from the full year. It was great to get back out and about and to be able to offer things to the community, as well as trying to keep staff motivated. That was extremely difficult when we were, kind of locked behind doors. The Oakton program participation looked great for the autumn session, creeping up on 2019 participation. So that's really exciting to see. And the STAR program continues to see new membership. They had many fun events for the holidays as well. The party at the country club saw 166 guests. It was a really great event. Gail and I both attended. That's always fun and a lot of dancing. The Brickton program at the Activity Center is also doing really well. As you can see in December, they saw a large growth in participation. And at the Fitness Center, the Member Appreciation Day returned, and members were thrilled to see their t-shirts back. So that was an exciting day. And then there was an open house that had 94 guests come through, and 23 participated in the Joe Herzog Memorial event. And as noted in the report, at least 9 new members that we know of and have recorded signed up as a result of the open house. So definitely feel like that's a worthwhile event. And we were all very excited to have 124 new members in December at the Fitness Center as well. This is a combination of the winter break short-term memberships. We're seeing some members come back from other facilities that really jacked up their prices. And there's also been an increase in the dailies, again, because of the winter break, and also the pickleball program with the change in rate and some of the dates. There's definitely been heavy usage there. So the aquatics program also saw a strong session to close out the year. And again, they offered the private lessons for those who are interested. So that was a great addition to the portfolio. And staff is currently working on the summer camp and spring brochures and gearing up for the summer season. That starts off right away. So those are some of the highlights. If anyone has any questions.
I have one. Can you explain to me the outdoor venue rental month of December count, the grid that you have there, where it's all zeros? There was
I know. I'm
okay.
like,
I was rounding. I was rounding.
I'm like, do we include
rounded
that
to
or
zero.
not? I guess it's.
I'm just. I'm assuming that that's how many venue rentals we have.
Yes.
So
I thought about pulling that too, and I'm like, yeah, there's one. So.
But I'm guessing, but you're showing up prior years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So is that for the month of December in prior years?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the month of December.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure, because if nobody's actually paying for the rentals, they're just going the venues and they're just going to the different places and using them. I know they can. I know they can. I just wanted because I don't know if I don't know if on public record that we probably don't have any real great enforcement for that. So I was wondering when I looked at this, do we? But it's hard. But I would imagine for some of these things to kind of control it. But all right, I appreciate the clarification, because I was like, okay. I looked at this and I was like, we don't have any But
one.
this is just for we have one, but it's for the whole, but just for the month, so my mistake on that, but that's all right. Thank you.
No, it was a special event permit.
But it wasn't at Wildwood.
No, I
Because
don't
they have
think
that
so.
fireplace there.
Which is really cool. I'm actually gonna rent that.
Well, and I mean, I thought it was very impressive to see that the customer satisfaction survey had a 91.16. Like that's a pretty big jump. Like that's something that I definitely think reflects quite positively on the staff and the facilities.
Very encouraging. It was tough with the past few years with all the restrictions. We definitely got a lot more negative comments.
And masks, probably a lot of masks.
Yes.
I bet that bump is due to people not having to wear masks.
Yes.
Also, I loved the
Also,
gnome
our
picture.
staff are great, but I think part of it was masks.
Okay, I want to know if the hats were put in after on the gnome picture. Were they real? They were real? They look like they were
It's
photoshopped.
Halloween. The sign is. And the beards. Nyx is really real.
I love the gnome picture. Yes.
Mhm. Any other questions? So the next item on the agenda, I know it states that we'll have a review and discussion, but we're not quite ready with the recommendation yet. So the memo is simply to state that it's going to be coming next month. So, so we'll have the recommendation for the T-shirt and apparel bid next meeting.
Well, we'll anxiously await that.
It's very exciting.
Thank you. And I think it goes to Buildings and Grounds and Commissioner Halting.
Thank you, sir.
I skipped right
I decided it was time to really dig into that and start to understand that because I've been doing this my whole life and I it, yeah. So, and I always like to say, like I've literally grown up in the industry of Parks and Rec. And so just in my life, I've always known that basically Valentine's Day, if you don't have ice on Valentine's Day, you're not making new ice past Valentine's Day. The reality of it is that that's based on what the average temperatures are at that time of year and what they continue to do. But things fluctuate from year to year, and so I've just never been able to kind of put my finger on exactly what it was. And so I decided to do all the research. I went through the Army Corps of Engineer, all these different places that I could look up these things, and I found a good explanation on a website. So I decided to share and modify that a little bit. But yeah, so that's what it looks like. I know we've got a cold snap coming up here. And I just did a quick calculation. And it looks like we could possibly, if we were at the point where it had that skim layer of ice that it needs to start building ice, which isn't going to actually happen right away on that first day. But if it did, at best, we're going to make like 1.9 inches of ice over those couple of 5 days. We don't know what the further out is. And, but it helps give people some sense of what it takes to get it there and what it takes for that ice to be made out there. So I'm glad that you find that helpful.
I heard that we're 10 degrees above normal this month for most of the days.
I believe
I just
that.
don't know if it's going to be worthwhile to do it without refrigerant.
Well, you mean like going forward in future years? Yeah.
It seems like it's less and less.
Yeah.
I heard next year is going to be warmer than this year. Because La Nina is going to El Nino. Yeah.
So, that's kind of the one point here. I do, as you all can see, Wohlers Hall has basically completed. We've got some walkthroughs and inspections scheduled for Monday. We've got some other kind of unrelated work happening tomorrow. So we're just about completed here with the project. I did want to talk about, obviously, we're going to city planning and zoning for 531 Forest View. We have a zoning map amendment there where we're changing it from residential to open space. It just overall it keeps us in line with what we have on all of our other properties, except for the Oakton garage. But that we'll be changing that as one of the many things we're going to the city for at some point there, which allows them to treat that as the park district recreation facility that it is. It has some certain parameters and things that are different between different zoning districts, and so it allows them to look at it from a coding standpoint, from a permitting standpoint. That okay, these things are things that you can do; they're allowable. So it just keeps us in line with everything. And as we're moving forward, and we're hopefully working with the city and getting some changes that are a little more reflective of what we as the park district do, those will most likely be encapsulated and centered around the fact that it's for open space type uses. So we're also going to be there for the main park playground, going through a site plan review. We have not had to do this in the past for a playground replacement, and so when we learned and heard from the city that we needed to do this, it was from some staff that are newer there at the city in their role, and this was their interpretation. We had a lot of discussion just at a staff level. We did, elevate this, each of us respectively, to our attorneys. They had discussions with each other, and it still, at the end of the day, Dirk did say we do need to go for this site plan review. However, all parties agree that the city code is basically too broadly written, which it allows for discretion and some interpretation by the staff there. And the staff there is interpreting that we are not replacing exactly this playground within this footprint with said playground in the same footprint. So therefore it's a change, therefore it's not a replacement, therefore it needs to go for a site plan review. The Planning and Zoning Commission has basically zero ability to tell us we can't do what we want to do out there, because that would impede our ability to deliver on our mission. So all parties agree on that, yet we still have to go in through the zoning. So, in some discussions with, with Dirk and with the staff over there, there's a couple of key things for them beyond just the little bit of the size difference and the type of playground difference. One, we're adding a water element, so that's, kind of on the cusp, a little different. And also just because of stormwater concerns. When I had the conversation with Dirk, he had, said to me that he was going to recommend that the commissioners follow up perhaps with their elected officials on the city side of it and suggest that, some changes are looked at. He and I had some discussion. I did just follow up with him with hearing that he wasn't going to be here, to follow up with him on some key points that I took from that so that I could share those with the board at this time. But that, updating the ordinance to incorporate a less broad language that identifies more clearly how the park district's projects would be handled. Or we could possibly go into the city and ask them or suggest that there be a memorandum of agreement or intergovernmental agreement between the park district and the city that describes exactly how we would handle these various projects, and how something like this would then be treated as a replacement and then not require us to go through this site plan. The biggest issue with this is that it really takes up additional time from the staff on both sides, both the city and the park district. And again, they really have no ability to interrupt our ability to deliver on our mission. So we're literally going through this process. We're going to be spending our evening there. Fortunately, in this situation, we were going there anyway on the same night. So it's not like we are suddenly now giving up a night, that we would normally not have to be in. But we have additional resources that we've had to expend. Fortunately, we have Jennifer Meunier on staff, who's very competent in her role, and we had a lot of the information ready to go, but it was her staff time, and she was able to compile everything. But in some of these scenarios, it could end up costing us money with consultants and things like that, depending on what they're looking for. So it was definitely an unfortunate situation, but I will tell you, even just with discussions of the staff at the city, they're also open to the idea. And so, we'll continue our discussions, but I do feel, and I think Dirk felt that it, and I believe Gail feels as well, that it would be beneficial that if you were so inclined to reach out to your elected official counterparts and suggest that they work on their end to make sure that people are being accountable on both sides of this discussion, so that we come up with a resolution that's better for the taxpayers overall.
Yeah,
So,
I think that we can get you that language, that Terry read, if that would be helpful. The talking points. This made us very angry, of course, and because we've been through several staff in this position, and it doesn't seem fair just because they changed their staff member that at the whim, it changes things for us that we've been doing for years in this case since we've been here, we've never had to go through a site plan review for a playground. So it wasn't as much, and they kind of went on this water feature thing, and it's really not a big water feature. I guess it is, you could technically call it that. We have changed the footprint of the playground sizes before. We've put different amenities in playgrounds. We've moved them places, in different locations. We've never had to do this. So I think that's more of the issue in terms of there's no specific direction for us. And now we don't want it to be very narrow, but it's up to the interpretation of their staff member. And they've changed, what is this? You said their fourth
I
person?
think this is
in
the fourth person
Yeah,
in
that
this
we've
role
dealt
that
with.
I've worked with.
So one of the points that Dirk made, though, is that we have a lot going on, as we know, with the city coming up. We don't want to be passive. However, we don't also want to be very defiant until, one of my things was that I wanted to fight it right away because we didn't want to set a precedent, right? So now as this precedent set, we have to go in for playground. Dirk, if you could believe it, calmed us down and told us, you know what, not the time for it. They're saying they're gonna do this. They're saying they're gonna change it. So let's work together. And I've, nothing but good things with Drew. Awesome, Drew is his name. And Terry feels the same, that our communications with them on some other items. So while we're asking you to go talk to the councilman, I don't want it to be this big, like us against them thing right now, because we're not handling it like that as a staff level. So I personally would say maybe wait until we have a proposal to them, because Dirk is working on this as far as what I've heard. I don't know. I just feel like if we go all after them now, we've got all this coming up with Oakton. I think it's a fine line, I guess is what long way of
I
saying.
think we can ask them to serve their community better
Yes.
in a very nice way, and half of them have sat at this table.
Exactly.
So, and they've been through
Absolutely. I'm just putting it in the context, like, let's not go in on attack mode yet, until we see if there is like a very big resistance and it's going to cause us a lot of hassle down the road, right?
costing us all money and time.
Right. It's money and time.
Right.
Now, this one, they say it should be we never know. They don't think it's a big deal, but it could become a big deal once it goes to this stage, right?
Yeah.
And then we'll spend more money making adjustments.
Right.
Can
And
I
so,
ask when the next meeting is, planning and zoning?
the meeting we'll be attending is Tuesday evening next week, the 24th.
And that's the one on Main Park and 531 Forest View, so.
So I think, just kind of expanding on this a little bit and going down onto the next schedule with the ongoing projects, you can see the Main Park playground. I've made an adjustment there, and that is because this came up as we were going through the permitting. We had our stuff in for permitting, and they were kind of dragging their feet, and what's going on? And then they said, well, and then of course all this was unfolding over the holidays, and then some people in their office got sick, and so either way, unfortunately, we were kind of working on some answers and trying to get out of doing this, but at the same time, Jennifer went forward and got all the documents and paperwork ready, and we put it in just in case. We weren't waiting for the call, and we put it in under protest, and said that we're giving you this, but we really truly hope you're going to throw this out and we're not coming to this for this meeting. So, but regardless, we had it in. So that is the reason why that has been adjusted, and then I adjusted the timing on the museum grant project from July to August. It really, we're not falling behind schedule on anything. It's just the reality of our plan was really for August, but we were kind of saying, because we're going to be finalizing some things in August. So I just wanted to figure now's a good time to make the clarification and just come out and say, we're not falling behind schedule. That's not a like, oh, wait, we're getting late in the game, but I'm adjusting that now so that it's proper. That's what our anticipated date was from the beginning. So I think that's it on my report. I'd be happy to answer anything.
So I heard you kind of quickly talk about like two possible like solutions to like prevent this in the future, either a change the ordinance to put more clarity on how this impacts Park District projects, or develop some sort of intergovernmental agreement where it's like we, the city and the Park District, agree not to do this. So do we know, I guess we'll wait to see, like, so Dirk is working on figuring out which one of those would be the preferred option, and then we would bug the alder persons about like which one of those we'd want to go after.
So I'm not sure where Dirk's at with that right now specifically, because up until just recently, I thought he was going to be at the meeting talking about this. But what I can tell you is that just from my perspective, I would believe an MOA or IGA would be the quickest route to relief for us on any future projects. That maybe that's step one, and that gets us up until a point in time in which the city decides to undertake the changing of the zoning ordinance, because that's kind of a different thing. That's kind of like us going in and saying, hey, your ordinances that you have, we want you to change them for our benefit. I mean, it would be not too dissimilar than someone asking us to change our policies and ordinances, and then that would be like, well, So I just think the MOA IGA would probably be the swifter route to find relief for the district and, quite honestly, the city as well.
I mean, we can talk about it more, but that would have to cover more than just playgrounds.
Oh yeah, exactly. It would have to we'd have to dive into what we think the zoning ordinances should say, and we'd have to somewhat capture that in an IGA that says that.
That could take a long time too.
Yeah, it could, but it would be probably quicker than the zoning. So
I wonder if other communities might have something like that we could look at, or
it's very possible. I think those are all good conversations that I'll be having with Dirk as we kind of look to move this forward. So
Hopefully Ansel has something similar that could be.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
I mean, you'd think with all the park districts.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's also a good opportunity for, the parties, even just attorneys, to discuss with each other, like, hey, look, we all agree that this is not in the best interest of either of their clients. How do we resolve this in the way that's mutually beneficial? So.
And is this mostly, I assume we do this when we like make big changes to buildings or build new things, but it's mostly like a playground thing.
Right.
That this
It is
feels
correct.
weird for,
Yeah.
because it's mostly open
That's true.
space.
This is mainly about the play.
Is it? Yeah, I was like, is this a playground problem?
Right now it is, but it. That's in our favor. Yeah.
So
well,
I mean, is there going to be a sizable stormwater impact? I forgot where we landed on the service, because it's wood chips now.
Yeah, but
we're moving to most of it being
they don't count wood chips as pervious, though.
They don't count it as impervious?
Sorry.
Or they don't count it as like natural. They
yeah.
count it as impervious surface wood chips? Oh, man.
I talked about the exhibit with the aquarium and the empty bottom and the wood chips and the pitcher water. We're not going there, though.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's an impact.
I'm already bugging multiple council members about something else, so I might leave this. And another thing. Thank you.
So if there's nothing else on my report, I will move on to a brief discussion about the Main Park Leisure Center roof renovation. As you can see, we have received a proposal, a quote in the amount of $275,000, which is less than what was in the budget for this. We had been initially the dollar amount, especially when it's a weird one like that, it was pre-populated from when it was originally when it was last replaced, and then escalated. So it was expected that it was going to cost that for a replacement. we started off looking at, we're going to replace this roof. Well, as we were looking into that, we had learned that there was this option to do this coating, which has and carries basically the same warranty period, but for a much lesser of the price. So typical commercial roofs like this, you're looking at about a 20-year life cycle. This process will carry a 20-year warranty. We did ask, well, how about if we just tear off and replace to make sure that we're getting the longest life on this? What can we expect? They said with a full tear off and replacement, we could expect a 25-year warranty would be the best we'd get, but the cost was going to be $1 million. So it just didn't really make sense at all. So we thought, you know what, this is good. 20-year warranty. And apparently this coating can actually be reapplied if things are still in good condition once you get towards that outer time frame. So we thought this was a great opportunity here for us to take advantage of this process and go with it. So yeah.
What is it, and who else is using it?
It's like a rubber. It's very common, I guess, but it's basically like a rubber, very similar to like the white TPO stuff that they actually have in rolls and they pour it on the roof, but they're just bringing it out in buckets and putting it over the course of the roof. So it's going to have a very similar finished product to that. It'll be reflective and light colored and very similar to what we have up there, because it's like a gray, like bitumen now, where it's got the, it's kind of like a big large shingle roll right now, and so this will just go right over the top of it.
Is it flat?
No, it's very low slope, very low slope. It's so low slope that you can't put standard shingles on it. So, yeah.
So it's lighter though. That's cool.
Yes. Yep. So.
Maybe find out who else has these type of.
Yeah, I can ask who else has been doing this. So.
Sounds like some Franken.
The company that
Whenever
we're
it says
working with.
proprietary coating, you're like, I need an MSDS for that. Like, what's in it? Is it fluorinated?
What is it?
Yeah.
The company that we're working with here, we did all the roofing projects with last year. They're like a national company. They're a really big, do a lot of work in this area. So they're through a joint purchasing agreement. So, I mean, my point is that this is something that they're doing in a lot of other places as well. But I can find out more specifically who.
A lot of crappy things all over the place. I don't know. For some reason, it just hit me like, what is this stuff? Is it like really?
Like what the material?
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, like what's the trade name of the coating or whatever?
Well, or is it healthy? I mean, is there any toxicity? I guess is what.
Yeah, yeah, it's a fair question.
It sounds like this miracle product, like Teflon. And we all know how that went.
All right.
That's what I'm saying. I don't know.
I will look into it and find out. Yeah, no problem. Any other questions?
And another thing. No more questions. Thank you. I just had to I did do a callback of Commissioner Coyne's bit. I will turn it. Is that it, Terry? You're done, right? I don't want to cut you off. Cool. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Tunnel to talk about the policies he's been developing in his spare time.
Thank you. I will yield the floor to Commissioner Bendy.
We had a very nice communication.
Yes. That was nice to read. All right. Any new business? All right. We did. We kind of did. All right. In that case, I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that passes over Commissioner Tunnel's objection. Meeting adjourned.